Buenas tardes a todos los que se están conectando.
Good
Muchas gracias
afternoon to all of
por
those who are
su puntualidad.
connecting.
Vamos a
Thank you
comenzar en
for being
unos
so
minuticos
punctual. We
mientras
will begin in
otros
just a couple of
colegas
minutes
terminan de conectarse.
while other colleagues
Así
connect.
que demos por favor un par de minuticos.
So if we could wait just a couple more minutes. Thank you.
Bueno, pues buenas tardes a todos y todas. Mi
Very well. Good
nombre
afternoon,
es
everyone.
Luis
My name is
González
Luis
y yo hago
Gonzalez,
parte
and
de
I
la División de Género y Diversidad
am
del BID,
working with the Division
que
on
hoy
Gender and
lidera este
Diversity
encuentro
at
junto
the
con
IDB, which
los
is
demás
heading up this
organizadores.
gathering
Para mí es un gusto
this
darles la
afternoon with
bienvenida
the other organizers.
y
I'm pleased to welcome
antes de
you.
iniciar me
And
permito
before
informarles que
we
este evento
begin,
cuenta
let
con
me tell
servicio de
you that
interpretación
we
simultánea.
do have simultaneous
Así que, por
interpreting
favor,
for
como
this event.
lo verá en la cenefa abajo,
So
escoja el idioma de su preferencia
you can choose the
con la
language
que
of your
quiere continuar
preference
esta
at
sesión.
the
Dicho eso,
interpretation
les
icon
damos la más cordial
at the
bienvenida al
bottom
encuentro
of your
preliminar de las
screen.
comunidades de
So we
práctica por
welcome you
oficinas
to
nacionales de
this
estadística
preliminary meeting
en las
of the
temáticas
communities
de
of
raza y
practice
etnia
on
y de
statistics in
orientación sexual
relation
e
to race
identidad de
and
género.
ethnicity,
Los
as
invitamos
well
a
as
escribir
gender
en su
identity and
nombre
sexual orientation.
la
We'd ask
oficina
that you
estadística de la cual nos acompaña junto
write
con el
which
país
statistical office you are
para
from
poderlos
and your
ir
country
reconociendo a través
so
del
that
chat
we can
y
recognize
en
you
sus
in the
cámaras.
chat and
Para
also on
comenzar,
camera.
tenemos el honor
To
de
begin, we
contar
have
con la
the
palabra de
honor of
bienvenida
having the
de la
welcoming
jefa de la
words
División de Género
of
y
the head
Diversidad
of
del
the
BID,
division, Gender and
Caridad
Diversity
Araujo. Así que,
Division of the
Caridad, por
IDB,
favor,
Caridad
adelante y gracias
Araujo.
por
So,
acompañarnos.
Caridad, you have the floor, and thanks for being with us.
Gracias, Luis. ¿Me puedes escuchar?
Thank you, Luis. Can you hear me?
Bueno,
Perfectamente.
Gracias.
Yes, perfectly well.
Buenas tardes con todos los
Good
asistentes. Les
afternoon to all
agradezco
of those
mucho por su
present. I thank
presencia
you very
y
much for
les doy
being
la
here,
bienvenida a
and I
todas las
welcome
personas que representan hoy a
all
las oficinas
those
nacionales de
who today
estadística de
represent the
América
national
Latina y el
statistics
Caribe y que
offices
nos
of Latin
acompañan
America and the
esta
Caribbean
tarde.
and who are with us this
También
afternoon.
quisiera saludar al equipo
I'd
de
also like
la
to
División de
extend
Estadísticas de
greetings to
CEPAL
the
y,
statistics
por
group
supuesto,
at
al equipo
ECLAC
coordinador de la
and, of
red
course,
de
the coordinating group
transmisión
of
del
the network
conocimiento
on
que opera
transmission of
desde el Instituto
knowledge that
Nacional de
operates from the
Estadísticas en
National
Chile. Es un gusto
Statistic
estar aquí.
Institute of
Con
Chile.
este evento
I'm really
queremos
pleased to
dar
be here.
inicio
Uh,
a las
with this event,
comunidades
we
de
want to
práctica y es un
begin
espacio,
the
a
communities
estas
of
comunidades de
practice.
práctica, es un espacio en el cual el
These
BID
communities of
quiere
practice are a
reafirmar el
space where the
compromiso que tenemos
IDP
con
seeks to
fortalecer
reaffirm our
la
commitment to
producción de información
strengthening the
estadística
production of
más
statistical
inclusiva y con
information
mayor
that's more
incidencia en la
inclusive
formulación de
and would have a greater
políticas públicas que
impact
nos permitan
on public
cerrar
policy
brechas
making so as to
de
be able to
diversidad.
close gaps related to diversity.
Esta temática, este objetivo fue
This
uno de los
issue and this
compromisos que adquirimos
objective
con
was one of the
varias de
commitments that we
las
took
ONGs aquí
on with
presentes y varias
several
de
of the
las
national
instituciones
statistics
presentes
offices here
durante
and
un
several of the
diálogo regional de
institutions here
políticas que
in a regional
realizamos
policy
el año
dialogue
pasado, en
that we held
2023, en
last year in
Colombia. Ahí
2023 in
estuvieron
Colombia.
representantes de 18 ONGs de la
Representatives of
región y
18 different
confirmamos
national
el interés
statistics
compartido
offices
de
of the
mejorar
region
la
were there, and we
producción
confirmed the
y
shared
la
interest
calidad
in
de los
sharing the
datos
production
relacionados
and
tanto con
upgrading
los
the
pueblos
quality of
indígenas,
data
los
related to
afrodescendientes,
indigenous
como con las
peoples,
personas
Afro-descendants,
LGBTQ+ en
as
la
well as
región.
LGBTQ plus
Y
persons
esto nos
in the
lleva a
region.
plantearnos
And this
y
leads
a
us
reconocer que
to
nuestra región
recognize
todavía
that
enfrenta
our
desafíos
region
en materia de
still
inclusión, pero que
faces
también a veces
challenges
se
when it
abren
comes to
oportunidades y
inclusion,
cuando
but
éstas se abren
sometimes
debemos
opportunities do open
tomar
up, and
esas
when they open up, we
oportunidades
should
y actuar
take up
respondiendo
those
a ellas.
opportunities and
Y
act
aunque hemos visto avances
responsively.
importantes en
We've
términos de
seen
marcos
major gains
normativos, en
in
algunos
terms
casos de
of legal and
políticas
regulatory
públicas
frameworks, in some
que buscan
cases in
garantizar
terms
los
of public
derechos de
policies that
grupos de
seeks to
población
guarantee
diversa,
the groups
también
of
existen brechas
diverse
importantes
population groups,
en
and there are
acceso
also
a
major gaps
servicios,
in
existe
access to
discriminación
services. There's
y también
persistent
persiste una brecha
discrimination,
en el
and there's also
reconocimiento
persistent
pleno en
gap
el
in
ámbito
full
estadístico, es decir,
recognition
persisten
in
problemas de
the world of
invisibilización de
statistics.
algunos de
That is
estos
to
grupos.
say, some of these groups
La falta
continue
de
to be
datos
rendered
adecuados
invisible. The
limita
lack
la
of
capacidad
adequate
de los
data
países de
limits the capacity
diseñar
of
y
the
darle
countries to
seguimiento de
design
políticas públicas
and
basadas en
follow up on
evidencia para
evidence-based
avanzar en
public
esta
policies to
agenda
go
de equidad
forward
y
on
justicia
this
social,
agenda
así
of
como de
equity and
dar
social
seguimiento a la
justice, and
evolución de aquellas
also to
políticas
follow
que se
up on those
implementan para
policies that are
conocer si
implemented
están
so
dando
as to
resultados y
determine
moviendo
whether they
indicadores
are
clave.
yielding results and moving key
Y pensamos que
indicators.
estamos en un momento
And we
crucial
think
para
that
unir
we're at a
esfuerzos
crucial
y
moment for
fortalecer
pooling our
capacidades,
efforts and
generando estos
strengthening our
conocimientos
capacities, generating
y
such
así
knowledge,
garantizar que nadie se quede
and
atrás en la
thereby to
producción
guarantee that no
estadística
one
de
is left
nuestras
behind
sociedades
in
y que
the
ésta
statistical
refleje la
production of our
diversidad
societies, which
que
should
caracteriza a
reflect
la región.
the diversity
Y eso es lo que
characteristic
nos
of the
convoca
region.
hoy.
And that is what has brought us
Queremos
together
tener un
today.
espacio que nos permita a
We want to
todos
have an
generar
opportunity
mejor
where
y
we can
mayor
all
comprensión de los
generate
retos que enfrentamos
better
y
and
que
greater
enfrentan ustedes en
understanding
las
of the challenges
oficinas
we
de
face and that
estadística,
you
en
all
el
face
proceso de
at the
producción de
statistics
datos,
offices when
así
it
como
comes to
también
producing data,
conocer
and
soluciones
also
y
learning
audaces
so that we
que han
can learn about
tomado
audacious
algunos,
solutions
innovaciones
that
que han ocurrido
and some
recientemente
innovations that have recently
aquí o
occurred
fuera de la región y
right
conocer
here
cómo han
in the
funcionado
region
esas
or beyond the region,
experiencias.
and to learn
Y el
how those
espíritu
experiences have
que
gone.
guía este esfuerzo
The
es uno de
spirit guiding this effort
cooperación, de
is
espacio
one
de
of
confianza y
cooperation
apoyo mutuo.
and in a space of
En el mediano
trust and
plazo
mutual
nos
support. Now, in
encantaría
the
que
medium
cada
term,
vez haya más
we would be
encuestas y
delighted for
censos,
there to be
en
more and
particular en
more
la ronda
surveys and
2030,
censuses,
que den
particularly
cuenta
in
de
the
la diversidad
2030
de la
round, that
región
take
de
account
Latinoamérica y el
of the
Caribe.
diversity of
Y
the Latin
confiamos
American
que
and
esta
Caribbean region.
colaboración de todas las
And we
oficinas de
trust that this
estadística
cooperative effort on the
y
part
de
of
las
all these
organizaciones aquí
statistical offices
presentes, con
and
el
all of the
apoyo de
organizations
socios
that are here with the
regionales,
support of
internacionales,
regional and
confiamos que en
international
este
partners, well,
espíritu
we trust
colaborativo
that
vamos a
in
ser
this collaborative
capaces
spirit, we
de
will
superar
be
los
capable
desafíos que hemos
of
enfrentado y
overcoming the
también de
challenges we
lograr que
face
nuestras
and
estadísticas
also
eh,
seeing to it that
experimenten esta
our
mejora
statistics
cualitativa y sean
undergo this
un
qualitative
más fiel
improvement
reflejo de
and
la
become a
diversidad y de la
more
riqueza
faithful
que
reflection
caracteriza
of the
a nuestra
diversity and
región. Y
richness
les
that
invito
is
a que trabajemos
characteristic of our
juntos en este
region. And
espacio
I would invite you that we all work
pues
together in
nuevamente
this
les doy la
space.
bienvenida y
And
les
once again, I
agradezco por
welcome you and
acompañarnos.
I thank you
Gracias.
for being with us. Thank you.
Mil gracias a ti, Caridad, por estas
Thank you
palabras.
so much,
Y
Caridad, for these
a
words.
continuación,
And next,
me complace darle la
I
palabra
am
al
pleased
jefe de la Unidad de
to
Estadísticas
offer the
Sociales
floor to the head of the
de la
Social
División de
Statistics
Estadísticas de la
Unit at
Central,
the
Javier
Statistics
Mancero.
Division of
Gracias, Javier, por estar con
uh,
nosotros y
ECLAC,
tienes
Javier
la palabra.
Mancero. Thank you, Javier, for being with us, and you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, Luis. Espero se me escuche
Thank
bien.
you very much, Luis. I
Bueno,
hope you can
gracias
hear
por la
me well.
invitación. Tengo
Thank
el
you for the
agrado y el honor
invitation.
de
I am
dar estas
pleased
palabras de
and
saludo a
honored
nombre del
to
director de la
offer
División de
these
Estadísticas,
greetings on behalf
Rolando
of the
Campo,
Director of the Statistics
que
Unit, Rolando
envía sus
Campo.
saludos también
He
y las
also sends
felicitaciones
greetings
por esta
as well as
iniciativa de impulsar
congratulations
dos
upon this
nuevas
initiative
comunidades
to give impetus
sobre
to two
estadísticas
new
sobre
communities
orientación sexual
on
e identidad de
statistics
género
on
y
sexual
estadísticas
orientation
sobre
and gender
raza y
identity, as
etnia.
well as
Creo que
statistics
una
on
palabra
race and
muy
ethnicity.
importante
I think that
en este ámbito de lo que
the very
estamos viendo
important
hoy
word
es
in what we're seeing
la de
today
colaboración.
is
Y en
collaboration.
ese sentido,
In
me
this
gustaría
regard,
destacar
I
que
would like to highlight
Conferencia
that
Estadística de las
the
Américas, que fue
Statistical
creada hace
Conference
ya
of the
23 años,
Americas, which was established
se ha
some
convertido
23
en un
years
espacio
ago,
regional
has
para la
become a
colaboración, una
regional
forma de
forum
promover el
for
diálogo entre
collaboration, a
países
forum for
y también
promoting
con
dialogue
organismos
among countries and
internacionales y
also with
regionales,
international and regional
y una
organizations,
forma de buscar
as
agendas de
well as a
trabajo
way to
comunes que
see
beneficien
common
al
working
desarrollo
agendas that
estadístico de la región.
benefit statistical
En
development
este
throughout the
espacio,
region.
digamos, en la Conferencia Estadística
Here
de las
in the
Américas,
Statistical
uno de
Conference of the
los
Americas,
elementos más conocidos
one of
son
the best
las
known
reuniones, donde en
aspects are
general
the
están
meetings
representados los países a través de los
where the countries are generally
directores y
represented through
directoras
the
de las oficinas
directors
nacionales de
of the
estadística.
national statistics offices.
Pero además de estas reuniones,
But
hay
in
un
addition to
vehículo
these
de
meetings, there
colaboración
is a
que son los
vehicle
grupos
of
de trabajo.
collaboration,
Ha
which
sido
are
la
the
principal
working groups.
forma
That
de
has been the main
interacción y de generar
form of
productos
interaction
del
and the main
trabajo
way to generate
mancomunado
products from
desde
our
hace
joint
ya
efforts,
casi las 2 décadas que
dating
tiene de
back,
existencia
well,
la conferencia.
practically the whole two
En este
decades that the
quehacer
conference has existed.
se ha visto
In
también la
this
necesidad
pursuit,
de otras
we've
formas de
also
colaboración.
seen
Los
the
grupos de
need for
trabajo
other
son muy
forms of
útiles,
collaboration. The
pero
working groups are
imponen
very
una cierta
useful, but they
estructura
impose a
que
certain
es más rígida,
structure
más formal,
that's
¿verdad?
more rigid, a
Requieren ser
bit more
aprobados en
formal.
cada reunión de la conferencia,
They need to be approved
se
at each
crean para
meeting of the
generar un
conference.
producto
They are created
específico
to
y
generate
esto
a specific
generalmente
product
funciona mejor cuando se
or
trata de
output, and this
temas
generally
ya
works best
probados en los
when
que
it is
básicamente
when
hay buenas
addressing
prácticas
issues
que
that
se
have already
pueden
been approved,
consolidar
where there are
de manera, en la manera de
good
recomendación.
practices that can be consolidated
Se ha
in the
visto
form
la
of
necesidad entonces
recommendations.
de encontrar el
And so
espacio
we've
para
seen the
otras
need
formas de
to find the
colaboración que sean
space
un
for
poco
other
menos
forms of
estructuradas que
collaboration
un
that are a
grupo de
bit less
trabajo,
structured
pero
than a
que
working group,
alienten a que
but
los
which
técnicos de las oficinas
encourage
nacionales de
the
estadística y de
technical
otras
personnel at the national
entidades
statistics offices and
gubernamentales y
other
otros
government
actores del
agencies
ámbito estadístico
and other
puedan
actors in the
también
world of
compartir
statistics can
experiencias, tener un
also
diálogo
share
y
experiences,
contribuir al
engage in
avance
a
regional
dialogue, and
en todos
contribute
los
to
temas
regional
que se nos
progress
presentan
on
como
all of the
desafíos.
issues
En
that
ese
we
sentido,
face as
las
challenges.
comunidades
In this
son
regard,
un
the communities
mecanismo
of practice are
especial de colaboración
a special
que
mechanism of
cumplen
collaboration
esta característica, ¿verdad?
that
El poder
have
permitirnos
these
abordar temas de una
characteristics,
manera más
enabling us to
exploratoria.
take on
Las comunidades
issues in a
forman
more
parte de lo que
exploratory
llamamos
manner.
la
The
red Transmisión del
communities are part of what
Conocimiento
we call the
y
network for
que
transmission of
también
knowledge,
ofrece otras formas de
and
intercambio
also
como
offer other forms of
webinars y
exchange, such
repositorios
as
de documentos
webinars,
e
as well as
información.
repositories of documents
Todo
and
esto en el
information.
conjunto o en el contexto de la Conferencia
All of this in the context
Estadística de las Américas.
of the
Vemos que
Statistics
estos
Conference of the
intercambios
Americas.
además
We see
son
that
más
these
necesarios que
exchanges
nunca. Es
are
conocido
also
que
more necessary
hay
than
una
ever. It's
demanda
well known
alta y
that there's a
creciente por
high and growing
estadísticas.
demand
Las
for
oficinas nacionales de
statistics.
estadística se enfrentan
The
continuamente a
national
esta presión
statistics
por
offices are
producir
continuously
información sobre
facing
más
this
temas con
pressure
mayor
to produce
periodicidad y
information
mayor
on more
desagregación,
topics more frequently
sin que
with a
esto vaya
great, more
necesariamente
refined level
acompañado
of
de
breakdown,
nuevos
and
recursos
that
para
this
atender esos fines.
needs to be accompanied
Y
by
de
new
hecho,
resources. And indeed,
la forma de abordar estos
the
desafíos es
way
algo que
to
se
take on
está
these challenges
discutiendo en
is
el
something
ámbito de la
that's being
conferencia
discussed
en
in
el
the
proceso de
uh,
generación de un nuevo
conference,
plan
in the
estratégico
process
para
of
el decenio
developing a new strategic
2026-2035,
plan
¿no? Este
for
plan busca dar una
2026
guía, más
at
o menos una referencia
2035.
amplia para
This
las actividades que se van a
is
desarrollar en
to
el
be a
contexto de la
plan, a broad
conferencia
reference for the
y
activities
que
to be
abordan
developed in the
diversas
context of the
líneas de
conference,
trabajo.
and that
Por un
take
lado,
and that
tenemos
address
todos
several
los
lines
temas
of work. On the one hand, we
institucionales y
have
de
all the
gobernanza
institutional
estadística y de
and
gobernanza de datos,
statistics
gestión de
governance
las
and data
oficinas
governance
nacionales de
issues,
estadística y la
the
interacción con los sistemas
uh,
estadísticos nacionales, y otros
interactions between the
proveedores de
statistics
información,
offices and the
¿verdad? El
national
propio sector
statistical
público,
systems,
del
as well
sector
as other
privado
providers of information,
y la
including the
sociedad
public sector
civil.
itself, the private sector, and
Por
civil
otro lado,
society.
tenemos todos los
In
desafíos
addition, we have
metodológicos que
all of
se
the
presentan
methodological
para el
challenges that come up
aprovechamiento
when it
de
comes
nuevas fuentes de
to
datos,
taking
obviamente
advantage
la
of new
inteligencia
sources of
artificial es un tema
data.
que es mencionado
Obviously, artificial
recurrentemente en
intelligence
estas discusiones,
uh,
pero en la que a la
comes up
vez
time and
no
again in these
debemos perder de
discussions, but at the
vista
same
los
time, we
desafíos
mustn't lose
relacionados
sight
con
of the
las fuentes
challenges related
tradicionales, ¿verdad?
to
Con
the
los
traditional
censos,
sources,
la nueva
censuses,
ronda de censos
and the
que
new
empieza a
round of
acercarse ya,
censuses that are
con
beginning to
la
approach,
amplia gama de encuestas de hogares
with the
que
wide
se
array of
levantan en los países de
household
la región
surveys that
y
are
otras
carried out in the
fuentes de
countries of the
información que
region,
sin
and
duda
other
siguen
sources of
siendo
information
el
which no doubt
principal
continue
recurso,
to
el
be
principal patrimonio
the main
estadístico con el que
resource,
contamos para las
uh,
estadísticas
the
oficiales.
main basis that we have for official
Quisiera
statistics.
enviar, bueno, para terminar estas palabras,
Now, to
nuestro enorme
conclude my
agradecimiento al
remarks,
BIP,
I
al INE de
convey
Chile
our
y a
words of
todas las
gratitude to the
entidades y personas que
IDB, the
colaboran en
INE
estas
of Chile, and
iniciativas
all
que
of
se
the
presentan hoy,
agencies and
porque
entities that are
son estos
collaborating in this
impulsos
initiative
los
that is
que
being
hacen
presented
que
today,
la comunidad
because it
estadística
is
regional se
impetus
fortalezca
such as this
y
that
que
leads the regional
logre
statistics community
productos
to become
útiles y logre
strengthened and to
efectivamente
accomplish
insumos que permitan
useful
a todos
outputs
los miembros de esta
and
comunidad seguir avanzando.
product
Sin
and
este tipo
inputs
de
that allow all
compromisos,
the members of the
la
community continue
conferencia
to go forward
estadística, la
in
red de
respective
transmisión del
commitments such as
conocimiento
this,
y las
this statistics
comunidades
conference, the
no
Network for
podrían
Transmission
haber
of Knowledge and the
prosperado de la
communities.
manera que lo han hecho
It
y
could
por
not
eso
have
mismo
uh,
esperamos que se
gone
sigan
forward as
fortaleciendo
they
estos
have,
procesos
and
y
we
los
hope that these processes
llamamos e
continue to
incentivamos
become
a que
strengthened,
participen de manera muy
and we
activa en
appeal to
estas
all
nuevas
of you to
comunidades.
participate
Muchas gracias.
actively in these new communities of practice. Thank you very much.
Pues muchísimas gracias a ti, Javier, y por supuesto a
Thank you very
Caridad
much,
por sus
Javier and
intervenciones que han
Caridad,
resaltado
for your
el contexto
remarks,
actual de
which have
nuestra
highlighted
región,
the current
los
context
avances
of our
logrados, por
region,
supuesto, pero también
the
esos retos
gains
que todavía
attained, but
persisten en
also
nuestros
the
países y
challenges
que
that
esperamos
persist in our
que
countries.
podamos trabajar en estas comunidades de
And
la
we hope that
práctica,
we'll be able to work with these
que
communities of
enfatizan, por supuesto,
practice,
la necesidad de cooperación
which
regional que
emphasize, of course, the
tanto
need for
Caridad como
regional
Javier nos
cooperation,
lo
which both
mencionaban,
Caridad and
para mejorar
Javier
la inclusión de estos
highlighted,
grupos de población
to
en las
improve the
estadísticas.
inclusion of these
Ahora
population
quiero
groups
contarles
in
cómo hemos
statistics.
estructurado
Now let me
la
tell you about
agenda muy
how we have
brevemente. A
organized the
continuación,
agenda very briefly.
profundizaremos en los
Next,
desafíos
we'll
relacionados con la generación de estadísticas para
discuss
grupos
more
de
about
población
the
diversa,
challenges when it comes to
específicamente
generating statistics for
qué nos
diverse
motivó
population groups, specifically
a crear estas
what led
comunidades.
us or motivated us to
Luego
create these
compartiremos
communities
las
of
actividades
practice. And
planificadas
then we will share
en
with
ambos
you
espacios.
the activities
Y
that have been
finalmente
planned in both
abriremos una
communities of
conversación con
practice.
ustedes
And
porque lo
finally,
más
we'll open up
importante
a
es
conversation with you
escucharlos,
because the most
conocer
important thing is to
sus
hear from you,
expectativas
to hear
y por
about your
supuesto
expectations,
los retos.
and of course, the
Para,
challenges
para
you face.
iniciar con el siguiente bloque de agenda,
To begin with the next part of our agenda,
para mí es un placer presentarles a mis
I'm
colegas
pleased to
Luciana Echeverry, que es
introduce my
especialista en
colleague
género y
Luciana
diversidad en el BIP,
Echeverry,
y
who
también
is
Ercio
a
Muñoz,
specialist in gender and
asociado
diversity at
senior
the
en
IDB, and
género y
also
diversidad también del BIP,
Ercio
hace parte
Munoz, who is a
de
senior
este equipo
associate
que
on gender
impulsa
and
las
diversity at the
comunidades de
IDB as
práctica,
well. And
y
they
nos van a
both
contar
participate in the
las
group, but
reflexiones
giving
que nos
impetus to the
llevaron a
communities of
impulsar la
practice.
creación de
And
estas
they're going to share
comunidades de
with us some
práctica.
thoughts
Entonces,
about what led
Ercio,
them to
bienvenido
establish these
y
communities of
gracias por
practice. So
estar con
Ercio,
nosotros.
welcome and thank you for being with
Muchas
us.
gracias, Luis. Buenas tardes.
Thank you,
Bueno, por
Luis. Good
supuesto que
afternoon.
con
Now, of
esta
course,
audiencia no es tan, no hace falta tanto, ¿cierto?,
I don't
comunicar o
think that
convencer de la relevancia de la
I need
estadística
to
en general.
convince you
Por lo
about the
tanto, lo
importance
que
of
quiero hacer es
statistics in
tomar unos
general,
minutos
mindful of the
simplemente
audience. So
para,
what I want to do is take
poniéndome
just a
tal vez un
few
sombrero
minutes,
de
putting
economista,
on my
investigador,
hat of a
hacer un
research
panorama de
economist,
algunas cosas que sabemos respecto a la
present an
población
overview
o
of
las
some
personas
things we
LGBTQ+,
know about
y
LGBTQ
también dar
plus
unos ejemplos
persons,
de
and also
la
give some
relevancia de la
examples
estadística
of the
respecto a
importance
esta población.
or relevance of statistics for this
Entonces, para partir,
population.
tal vez, ¿qué sabemos sobre
So
algunas
to
cosas? Por
begin
supuesto,
with, what
esto
do
no
we know
es
about some
comprehensive.
things? This is not
Algunos,
comprehensive.
existen algunos resultados descriptivos
We do
en la
have
literatura,
descriptive results in the
especialmente de países
literature,
desarrollados, pero algunos
especially
también
in from
corroborados
developed countries, but
en
some have also been
datos que se han
corroborated in
recopilado en
data that
nuestra
have
región.
been compiled in our
Sabemos, por
region.
ejemplo, que
We
hombres
know,
gay
for
en
example, that
promedio
gay
tienen
men
ingresos laborales menores que
generally
sus pares
have lower incomes
heterosexuales.
from their
Sabemos que
their
mujeres lesbianas
heterosexual
tienen
peers. We also
50
know
que
that
ganan menos
lesbian
que mujeres
women
heterosexuales,
do not earn
aunque
less
sí
than
menos que los
heterosexual
hombres
women,
heterosexuales.
though they do earn less than
Sabemos que en general
heterosexual
las
men.
personas
We know that
bisexuales
in
ganan
general,
menos que las
bisexual
personas
persons
heterosexuales.
earn less than heterosexual
Eso,
persons.
como decía, principalmente en países desarrollados.
This particularly,
Luego,
as
en
I was
términos de
saying, in
empleo,
developed
cuando uno mira
countries, that
estadísticas de
in terms
empleo,
of
sabemos
employment,
que
if
las
you look at
personas
employment employment statistics, we
tienen
know that
menores niveles
trans
de empleo.
persons have lower levels of
mayores tasas de
employment
pobreza que
and
personas no
higher
binarias que son
poverty
cisgénero,
rates than persons who are cisgender,
especialmente las mujeres trans y las
especially
personas trans de
trans
color.
women and
Cuando
trans
miramos a
persons
niveles
of color.
educacionales,
Well, if we look at
lo que
education,
dice
level
o
of
lo que demuestra la
education,
evidencia
what the
existente
evidence,
es que se ven
existing
mayores
evidence
niveles
shows is that
educacionales en
one
personas gay
finds
y lesbianas
higher
adultas.
levels of educational
Lo que puede tener
attainment
diversas
in
explicaciones.
adult gay and
Por
lesbian
ejemplo,
persons.
que
Now, there could
al
be
tener
different
mejor nivel
explanations. For
socioeconómico,
example,
mejor nivel educacional, hay
uh,
personas
uh,
que, por ejemplo, pueden
by
vivir
gaining
con su
access
identidad.
to a better
Por supuesto que estos
educational
resultados son
level and a better
particulares
socioeconomic
relacionados con
level
la
are
orientación sexual.
persons
No es
who
lo
are
mismo
able to
cuando
live
uno
with their
empieza a mirar,
identity.
por
Now, it's
ejemplo,
not the same
estadísticas basadas en identidad de
thing
género.
if you
Las
look at
personas trans
statistics
tienden a
based
tener,
on gender
tener
identity,
menores
where
niveles
trans
educacionales.
persons tend to have lower
Luego, en
levels
términos
of
de inclusión, por
education.
ejemplo,
Now, in
los
terms
datos
of inclusion,
levantados en México con la encuesta en DICET, que es
data that
única
was collected
en
in
términos de
Mexico
una
that is
encuesta nacionalmente
unique in
representativa
terms
que
of a nationally
identifica a las personas
representative survey
intersexuales.
that identifies
A través de esa
intersex
encuesta podemos ver
persons.
que las
Through
personas
a survey, we
intersexuales
find that intersex
presentan
persons
mayores
show
niveles de experiencias
greater
de
levels
rechazo
of
durante la
being
infancia, adolescencia, también
rejected
cuando son
during
adultos,
childhood
y
or
menor bienestar
adolescence or when they're
autorreportado que las
adults,
personas
and
que no son intersexuales o las personas endosexuales.
lower levels of well-being
Entonces,
than
obviamente,
persons who are not
estadísticas descriptivas abren
intersex.
la boca o
So
ponen
this descriptive
una luz sobre
overview
cosas que uno
casts some
necesita
light
explicar, ¿cierto? ¿Por
on
qué
things that
existen esas
need to
diferencias?
be
¿Cuáles pueden ser
explained.
los
Why
motivantes? ¿Qué es lo
do
que está
these differences
pasando?
exist? What
¿Dónde hay
is the
discriminación? ¿En qué
reason for
mercado? ¿En
them?
qué
What is
instancias de
going on?
discriminación?
What exactly are these
En ese sentido,
experiences of discrimination
ya
in which
viendo a
markets?
términos de explicaciones tal vez,
Now, turning to explanations, perhaps,
sabemos también, hay
we
evidencia
also
de,
know
por
there
ejemplo,
is
discriminación en diversos
evidence,
mercados
for
y
example, of
contextos.
discrimination
Sabemos
in
que
different
en este tipo
markets and
de estudios,
contexts.
por ejemplo, que
We know
son ya
that these
causales, donde
kinds of
se
studies,
testea, por
which are
ejemplo, a través de
causal, which
correspondencia
test
o de
through
experimentos, por
correspondence
ejemplo, en el
or
mercado laboral,
detriment, for example,
la recepción o cuántas
labor
llamadas para un
market,
trabajo tienen
or
cierto
how
tipo de
many
postulantes.
times does
Entonces hay
one get
evidencia en
called, do
distintos
certain
mercados,
applicants get
en
called
ciertos
back
países,
for
que postulantes
interview?
gay y lesbianas
Well,
tienen
there are different
36% menos
uh,
probabilidad de
job
tener una
markets
llamada de
in which
trabajo
a
para
gay and
una
lesbian
entrevista.
applicant would have
Cuando
36% less likelihood of getting called
revelan
back
su
for an interview
identidad en
once
términos de
they
orientación sexual. También
reveal their
en términos
sexual
de oferta de
orientation.
salario, hay algunos
Now,
estudios para
also in
algunos
terms
países
of salary
particulares que hay
offers,
efectos
there are
negativos de la
studies
orientación sexual.
for some specific
También hay
countries showing a
penalidades
negative
que
effect
afectan
of
en el
sexual
mercado
orientation.
laboral a
There
los
are also
postulantes
penalties
trans.
that
Y
affect
también hay
trans
evidencia
job
levantada
applicants. And there's also
en Latinoamérica,
evidence
en la región,
collected in
que
Latin
muestra, por
America in the
ejemplo,
region that
que
shows, for
existe
example,
discriminación en contra de
that there is
personas gay
discrimination
y trans en
against
el
gay and
mercado
trans
de arriendos
persons in
en
the
4 países de
rental market
Latinoamérica,
in 4 countries of
así
Latin
como
America,
discriminación en
and
contra de
also
niños
discrimination against
provenientes de hogares conformados
children
por parejas del
from
mismo sexo. Por
households
ejemplo, en el
made
caso de
up of
Colombia,
same-sex couples.
estudios
For
con
example,
evidencia
in
causal súper
Colombia,
rigurosos
there
que muestran
are
que existen estas
uh,
disparidades en ciertos
these
mercados
are
y
rigorous
contextos.
studies showing this disparities in certain markets and certain contexts.
Luego, entonces tenemos esta evidencia, ¿cierto?, que
Then
se ha
we have
generado
this
gracias
evidence
a
that has been
encuestas
generated
nacionalmente
thanks
representativas que han
to
incluido
a
preguntas
representative survey that has
fuera de
included
Latinoamérica y en Latinoamérica,
questions,
que
and these
permite
have been
detener cierta
outside of Latin
información
America
descriptiva,
and
pero
in Latin
también
America, to getting a certain
información causal o evidencia experimental.
information,
Pero
but
luego, ¿qué
also
se puede
some
usar o
causal
cuál es la
information.
relevancia de esta información?
Now,
Entonces, solo
how
quería
could this
aquí dar
information
un
be used,
ejemplo.
or what is its relevance?
Por
I just
ejemplo,
wanted to cite one
en Estados
example.
Unidos,
For example, in
con
the
la
United States,
encuesta Household Pulse Survey,
with
se hizo
the
un
household
estudio para
survey,
cuantificar
a
las
study was
ganancias
done
económicas
to
de
quantify
incluir a las
economic
personas
gains
LGBTI.
of
La ganancia
including
económica uno también lo puede
LGBTI
ver como el
persons.
costo de no
Or
incluir.
this could also be considered the
¿Qué se
cost of
encontró con
not
esto?
including
Se
them. What was
encontró
found
que
with
en
this? It was
Estados Unidos,
found
por
that in the
ejemplo, si
United
se
States, for
cerraran las brechas no
example,
explicadas que
if
afectan a la población LGBTI en empleo y productividad
looking
al 2050,
if the United
el
States were to
incremento
close the
sería igual a
gaps not the
2,6%
unexplained gaps that affect the LGBTI
del PIB,
population
sería
negatively in employment and
2,6% más
productivity, but
que el
as
que se
by
proyecta
2050,
baje al
the increased
2050.
GDP would be
Asimismo,
would
si
be equal
hubiesen
to
metas más
2.6% of
ambiciosas
GDP
en términos de
projected
cerrar
for
esas
that
brechas,
year, the
por ejemplo,
baseline.
estas brechas se cerraran
Now,
en el
for example, if
2030,
this
esto llevaría a un
gap
PIB
were to
anual
be
de
closed
una
in or
magnitud
bridged
de
in
10%
2030,
superior
it would lead to an annual
anualmente,
GDP
si
that
uno lo
would be
compara con
10%
el
greater
crecimiento promedio que hubo
compared
entre
to
2013 y
average
2017.
annual
Entonces,
growth
esto es para
2013 to
cuantificar cuánto de los
2023. So
recursos,
this
¿cierto?,
is
cuánto
to
se está perdiendo
quantify
por no incluir.
how much
Esto
is
solo
being
se puede
lost in
realizar,
the
este
economy
ejercicio solo se puede
from
realizar si
not
uno
including these persons. This exercise can
tiene los
only
datos,
be
¿cierto?,
carried out
cuantifica, tiene
if
toda la
you have
información
the
sobre el mercado
data,
laboral y
quantify
puede tomar
data
decisiones
on
¿cierto?,
job
basadas en
markets,
orientación sexual, identidad de
and
género.
if you also have
Ahora,
data
¿es relevante
on
generar estos
sexual
registros?
orientation and
Entonces,
gender identity. Now, is it
el siguiente
relevant to
ejemplo
generate statistics such as this? Well, the next example is a study where also using rigorous methodologies. This is likely analysis done in the United States, but in this case, it was analysis in Serbia, Turkey, and Ukraine, and it changes the perceptions of this can change the perception of the population with respect to public policy. This is informational intervention, for example, where a group of persons were given information about the cost of not including or the economic gains of including certain persons, and this affected the likelihood of these persons supporting, for example, policies related to providing opportunities, for example, that there be a law, a statute to safeguard making sure that there be no job discrimination based on sexual orientation. This is the case of Serbia, Turkey, and Ukraine. This information made it almost 50% likelier for persons to support such policies. And this is important given that public policies depend on popular support for them. So generating statistics is very relevant when it comes to persuading and changing the political support of the population in favor of a given community or a given policy. Finally, seeing as we know some things, what is the information that's been collected outside of the region and inside the region? There's also some information and how we can use it going forward. And that's the main reason why we have these communities of practice. We have many opportunities to generate new statistics. For example, surveys focused on LGBTI population in Chile, Ecuador, and other countries of the region. There's also the new round of censuses, which was mentioned by Caridad in her welcoming words, where there's also an opportunity to collect information that could be useful. And all of these opportunities are matched by a set of challenges. And our intention is for us to resolve these challenges together, collaborating and sharing the experiences of the statistics offices in the different countries of the region, the challenges in terms of defining the questions, the concepts, the amount of information that needs to come through in terms of sample size and opportunities for analysis. Okay. Information collected might depend on scale of the operation, then strategies of collection, the different forms or ways of collecting information. It could be through the web, through a personal interview, an audio interview, and so on. And all of these methodological decisions that are so important, training personnel. How are these operations going to be implemented and applied to the person who is to be interviewed, the interviewer, and how are the people who are going to do the data analysis to be trained, as well as those who are going to disseminate these with standards of quality, privacy, and all these conditions that you all know very well. I'm going to leave my presentation at that, and I'll now give the floor to my colleague, Luciani.
Thank you very much, Ercio. Good afternoon. As Ercio said, and Karina too, in the regional policy dialogue last year and throughout all of our collaborations and interactions with national statistics offices, we were able to see the major commitment on your part and on the part of the institutions you represent to improve the quantity and quality of surveys on gender and diversity and the related statistics. And this commitment, as well as the existence of specific recommendations, considering the 2010 census round, to include specific questions on ethnicity and race, this has led to significant improvements towards understanding the major diversity that exists in our region. And we can see that out of the 26 censuses conducted in the 2000 round, about half allowed identification of Afro-descendants. And if you look at the censuses in the last round, out of 14, 12 enabled identification of Afro-descendants. So although there are some opportunities to include such questions when we think about censuses and household surveys, we start to think about the quality of data. So it's not just about having those questions included, but also this allows us to start to think about the quality of the data. And the data also help us learn that when it comes to the Afro-descendant population, one of the largest groups in the region, accounting for over 150 million people, 2% in Mexico and over 50% in Brazil. And if we look at the indigenous population, we know it's over 50 million people. There are over 800 indigenous peoples with a wonderful cultural and linguistic diversity. This information also shines a light on the gaps that exist in terms of the socioeconomic results when you consider the indigenous and Afro-descendant populations. We can see that there are lower rates of schooling, lower coverage when it comes to bilingual intercultural teaching, also higher infant and maternal mortality rates, higher poverty rates, just to give a few examples. And when we consider the importance of high quality and timely and relevant statistical information, this is very important to design public policies that will promote inclusion and well-being for all. And actually, this cartoon, I thought would be nice to share with you. This is a situation where there's someone looking for something, and along comes perhaps an officer, a government representative, and they say, "Is this where you lost your wallet?" And the other person says, "No, I lost it in the park, but this is where the light is." So this highlights the importance of data and the importance of disaggregated data broken down by, say, indigenous populations, and also the intersection to be able to understand the different gaps that exist across indigenous peoples, and also help close those gaps. And what data are especially relevant to these diversity groups, because we need to take into account the specificities of the issues and problems they face in their countries and in their lands. Although there has been significant progress to raise the visibility of such populations, as we know, this has an impact in terms of resource allocation, for instance, and investments in certain geographic areas, or even in some key sectors for such population groups. There still remain considerable challenges, which also create opportunities and also for possible collaboration and work based on the lessons learned from across the region. And these challenges have to do, on the one hand, with the fact that we know there are different levels of political maneuvering room. There are certain sensitivities when it comes to certain population groups that also demand data, and the data in certain cases have to do with long-standing claims and a desire to be more visible and to enjoy more participation. But including these questions and producing the data may be costly. In some cases, it may require reviewing the survey and sampling patterns, sizes, if we look at regular household surveys as opposed to specific surveys. And there's also a number of technical and specific matters related to practices which also present opportunities for improvement. Self-identification in itself is not what it's about, because we know there are challenges related to systematizing processes, also the degree of participation of Afro-descendants and indigenous persons during the statistical process. And on the other hand, there isn't really a full understanding of other key factors. For example, the way the questions are asked, the categories used to enable the responses. Also, there's the information and awareness campaigns before, during, and after the surveys. And then, generally speaking, the questions and self-identification will also depend on attitude changes in the countries with regard to these diverse populations. So there's a host of challenges that are also linked to opportunities for learning and collaboration. And also these are opportunities to share experiences across a region, which has such a wealth of diversity. And also the work you have been doing is very conducive to this, considering your own individual context. And all of this encourages us to kick off this work with the communities of practice. Thank you. Over to you again, Luis. Thank you very much indeed, Luciana and Ercio, for your presentation. I dare say these presentations show how the demands placed on statistics offices are growing, and there are challenges that need to be addressed in terms of the production and generation of statistics. So thank you to both of you for your presentations. Now I'm honored to introduce Olga Barquero, who will be talking about the role of the Knowledge Transfer Network of the Statistical Conference of the Americas under ECLAC. Olga is the head of the Institutional Cooperation Office at the Statistics Institute of Chile. Thank you for being with us, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Luis, for your introduction, and a good afternoon to all. I would first like to start by especially thanking the IDB for the invitation to take part in this launch. We, as coordinators of the Knowledge Transfer Networks, are certainly very pleased to be able to hit this milestone today. I would also like to thank you for having got in touch with the Knowledge Transfer Network to launch this major project, which will help us boost the exchanges of good practices and also help us generate new statistics with a focus on these two population groups. As already stated, and as Javier said at the outset, the Knowledge Transfer Network is a space for strengthening knowledge and cooperation in the field of statistics in Latin America and the Caribbean. And this dates back to the Statistics Conference of the Americas in 2007. And back then it was established as a mechanism to promote and coordinate coordination across statistics office. But it was only in 2019 when Eileen accepted the challenge of coordinating the network and breathing new life into it. All of this in coordination with Statistics Division of ECLAC that works very closely with us as Technical Secretariat. And RTC has a group of allies, and you as the IDB are also becoming one of our key strategic allies, joining us in these efforts to disseminate knowledge and also to cooperate through exchanges across the region's countries. Allow me to say that precisely 2019 happened to be the time when the COVID crisis led to this major impact on the coordination work and statistics, not only in our region, but across the world. And this was actually around the time when the knowledge transfer network was launched or relaunched. And so we were faced with this opportunity to take advantage of this space. And that was when we started to organize meetings and exchanges, especially with a methodological focus, to see how we could deal with the situation and how we could continue to generate statistics amidst the crisis we were dealing with. And I'm happy to say that since then, we've been able to institutionalize cooperation in the region through what we call the RTC, or in English, the KTN, Knowledge Transfer Network. And this has included the involvement of several statistics offices across the region. And as Javier said at the outset, we also have support from several specialized institutions, the IDB being a case in point. And certainly all of this collaborative work we have been able to formalize and institutionalize has become a super important way to enhance statistics in the region. One of the main challenges or goals we set as the coordinating country for the 2024-2025 biennium, as part of the work we do within the network, has to do with continuing to strengthen coordination in these foreign spaces, but we also want to continue to promote new forms of cooperation. And this is a very clear example of just this. And we do hope that countries will be able to take advantage of this through their experts, and they will be able to share experiences. And perhaps those who haven't yet started to prepare and generate statistics on such important matters, well, they may also perhaps learn from the work done by other countries in the region. Currently, in the network, we have two work pillars. One is Conectados RTC, which is a series of video conferences we host from time to time. On average, we have 2 monthly, and in that context, we deal with different matters of interest to statistics offices, always with a focus on making sure that our countries can learn from those who've actually had experience in a certain field. And over the course of the 5 years of coordination work, we think these meetings have become a vital tool, and I think they're really being taken advantage of by statistics offices. And then the KTN communities is also what we are launching here today. And the idea is to offer an opportunity to share good practices between and among countries, but also to offer a safe discussion forum so as to share documents and material which will also be available on the platform, in addition to providing an opportunity for the countries and representatives of the countries in this new community to come together. I always like to draw this comparison when we talk about the KTNs, because at one point we had got used to WhatsApp being our informal preferred communication channel with other parties in other countries. And in a way, we are trying to get the communities to replace WhatsApp and to have the more technical conversations with our specialized peers, shift to these communities, which also offer a chat option to contact all members of the community. Currently, the KTN communities have we have 8 communities working, and they have all been highly successful. And we are continuing to strengthen the work by launching these 2 new communities. And well, we have race and ethnicity on the one hand, and sexual orientation and gender identity on the other. As coordinator of the KTN network, we are very pleased because you see, as Luciana said, what you don't measure will not improve. And we are also certain that these communities will help us make headway in terms of what the SDGs have made a key theme, which is to leave no one behind. So, of course, we are willing to help with any questions, and also happy to share any contributions on our side. And we would like to invite us all to really commit to the success of these 2 communities, because although the mechanism has already been created and we have confirmed that it does work, unless we have a commitment on the part of each focal point, all of the work done until now may not come to fruition. So we'd like to call on you to really make a commitment to become actively involved and to become a key component of the success of these 2 committees. So any doubts you may have on the knowledge transfer network, feel free to check things out on the website of the KTN, and I will also leave on the chat the email of the Knowledge Transfer Network, just in case you have any questions or queries. So thanks again for the invitation, and I wish you every success as part of the launch of these 2 new committees. Thank you very much for your remarks, and I think all those who have been involved certainly have embraced the importance of regional cooperation and coordination. And although it would seem that we have already rehearsed everything, it's really not the case, and I'm very pleased to see how things are flowing. I would now like to give the floor to our next speaker, who's a specialist on gender diversity, and Nadine will be explaining the purpose of these communities and how they work. Thank you very much, Luis. We currently have 35 participants connected, and at least 10 countries. Our team leading the committees of practice at the IDB, well, there's of course Luis, Ercio, Mighty, and I myself. We are very, very thankful for your interest and for your participation. Actually, if we could sum this up in a single slide, committees of practice are a space for the national statistics offices. We want them to be there for you and to provide an opportunity to share expertise, knowledge, identify good practices and lessons learned, and also a safe space in which we can also say, I really don't know, I don't have the answer. We can also talk about the things that went wrong and also draw lessons. We at the IDB have decided to facilitate this space and also trying to help the national statistics offices to appropriate these spaces. We have also set up a working team with 6 countries, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Honduras, Mexico, and Peru, in the context of a regional public good. And in this working group, we are tasked with systematizing good practices and to come up with a specific deliverable, which is an instrument to improve statistics on sexual orientation, gender identity, and ethnic and racial identity. And we see a great opportunity for synergies between the communities and the working group to disseminate the work as we move forward, but also to get feedback for this regional public good. I would like to take a few minutes to tell you about how we've been trying to land the feedback we have got from you at the level of specific activities that may be good, useful material for the communities of practice. So as I speak, of course, feel free, if you have any questions, to share that on the chat. And at the end, we'll have an opportunity to address those questions. Where do we stand? We are at an initial assessment stage. We have identified 3 tools. This event is one of them. The other one is the surveys that we shared along with the invitation, and which we'll also include on the chat, because the surveys and questionnaires are still open. And once the event is over, we would like to invite you to complete them. And the UN World Data Forum of December of this year would also be very interesting, by way of an opportunity to engage in exchanges and to meet face-to-face as well. So back to this. When we were thinking about the forms and what we wanted to learn about you, we thought it would be interesting to identify bottlenecks throughout the different stages of the statistical generation process. And we thought it would be a very different picture in gender, identity, and sexual orientation on the one hand, and race and ethnicity. Honestly, the results were quite remarkable. When we asked if the collection of variables address all information needs, for sexual orientation and gender identity, 70% answered no. In the case of race and ethnicity, the opposite. 70% said yes. When we asked whether statistical operations reflected the diversity of the country, for sexual orientation and gender identity, 86% of respondents said no. And it was precisely the opposite for race and ethnicity, which leads us to think that we may well need different contents and themes within each of the communities. We also asked about their interest in certain specific activities which we had considered for inclusion within a work plan. We had imagined seminars with policymakers or members of academia, and we had also envisaged 2 types of meetings between the national statistics offices, one including a large number of national statistics offices, and on the other hand, some smaller ones, perhaps bilateral or with 3 offices. And we also found that there was considerable interest in these activities. We can continue to refine this, of course, but so far we have found that there is interest in all of these activities. So thinking about how to actually materialize this through a work plan, we found 3 items that we would like to include in the work plan. These opportunities for coming together and for exchanges. And amidst these spaces for exchange, as Olga noted, we think it's also very important to have other materials or channels to keep us connected. Blogs, summaries of the discussions we've had, repositories with news on developments, and all of this would be included along with the videos of our sessions on the KTN platform. It's very important to reflect on how the community of practice is unfolding, and if necessary, we can also make adjustments. So I want to be specific in terms of what we are envisaging. For 2025, we are considering 4 events. 2 of them would be these meetings with the national statistics offices, which would also be the opportunities to talk to the working group that is working on the regional public good. And then we have also envisaged these events by way of seminars with people who work on policy design, and also with academics, perhaps with an audience that goes beyond only national statistics offices. So we would have these 4 yearly events for each of the communities of practice. So we would be looking at 8 events every
que
year.
estén de manera intercalada.
That would be sort of interspersed across the calendar. And I would like to conclude my presentation by telling you about some of our next steps. And of course, if you already have an idea as to the individuals or the experiences of public policy or practitioners that you would like to perhaps bring to our attention, please share that with us. On next steps, just 4 reminders. We will be at the World Data Forum. We'd love to see you there. In order to access the website of the Committee of Practice, the KTN and the contents, we would like to ask you to let us know who the focal points are so that we can create the users and you can access the portal. Another important next step has to do with something that the Statistical Office of Chile has found very useful, a training session with a tour of the KTN platform to really make the best possible use of the resources. And I would also like to thank the Statistical Conference of the Americas, the KTN, and the National Statistics Office from Chile for including us. Thank you.
Mil gracias, Nadine, por tus palabras y por
Thank you,
explicarnos cómo
Nadine,
vamos a operar
for those
en
remarks and
esta
for
comunidad de
explaining
práctica.
a bit
Yo ahora
about how we're
quisiera
going to work
invitarles
within the community's
a
practice.
que
I would
levanten
now
la
like
mano
to
para
invite you to
escucharlos,
raise your
para que
hand. We would like
resolvamos
to
preguntas que
hear
tengan
from you and would like
y
to
para,
hear
por
what
supuesto, hacer
questions you
la
have
conversación mucho más
and,
amena.
of course, to make the conversation
Lo que les
a
quiero contar
lot
es
more
que
lively.
nos gustaría sobre todo
Let me
conocer
say
la
that we
perspectiva
would
del día a día
especially
de sus oficinas
like to hear
para
about
que también,
the
además de las preguntas
day-to-day
que les hacemos, que les
work
hacemos
of
llegar
your
proporcional y que está en
offices.
el chat o en la invitación de la agenda, que
We
les enviamos
have
de manera que
sent
lo
you
tienen,
the
pues
questions
además también
as
están
well for you
invitados
to
a usar el
answer.
micrófono y a
And
contarnos un poquito del día a
apart
día
from
de sus
that,
oficinas estadísticas y
feel free to just
y
take
cuáles
the
son sus
floor
percepciones.
and tell us about
Mientras
your
se animan,
statistics offices
quisiera
and
darle la
what your
palabra a
experiences are.
Lorena
So
Parreño,
while you muster up
de la
the
Coordinación de
courage, I
Innovación
would
de
like to give the floor
Métricas
to
y
Lorena
Metodologías
Parendo
del
from
INEC
the
de
Office
Ecuador.
of Coordination on
Lorena, gracias
Metrics
por
and
estar con nosotros
Methodologies from
y
Ecuador.
bienvenida.
Lorena, thank you very much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias, Luis, y buenas tardes con todos y
Thank you,
todas.
Luis,
Gracias por la
and good
invitación también a
afternoon
comentarles un
to
poco
all of
sobre
you. Thank
la
you for this
experiencia de
invitation
Ecuador en la
to talk
medición de la
about
orientación
the
sexual e
experience
identidad
in
de género en
Ecuador
el último
regarding
censo.
the measurement of sexual orientation and
Brevemente
gender
quiero
identity
comentarles
in
que,
the
bueno,
later
para
census.
nosotros fue
Very
la primera
briefly,
vez que
let me
medimos
say that
estas
this was
dos
the first
variables en
time
una
we
operación
looked at these two
estadística. Lo
variables
hicimos en el
in a
2013 a
statistical
manera
operation.
de
We did so
un
in
estudio de caso
2013
que era no
as
probabilístico
part
y
of a
por lo
case
tanto no
study that
tenía
was
representatividad
non-probabilistic
nacional
and was therefore not
y tampoco
representative
territorial.
nationwide
Entonces, el
or
censo era una
territory-wide. So the
oportunidad
census
para
provided an
dar la
opportunity
visibilidad
to
completa de
afford
esta población,
full
de conocer
visibility
la
to
diversidad
this
real
population
de
and to
nuestra
really
población.
learn about the
Entonces,
actual true
ese
diversity
proceso, ese
of our
camino,
population. So this
comentarles
process
que ha sido
or this journey
bastante
has
difícil
been
también,
quite challenging
bastante
as well,
gratificante también.
also
Y en
rewarding,
ese sentido, el INEC, el Ecuador, ha puesto
and
varios
the National
de sus
Statistics Office
esfuerzos
of
en
Ecuador
lograr
has
que sea
devoted
precisa la
considerable
medición, de
efforts
tener
to
toda
ensuring the
el
accuracy
bagaje
of the
técnico hacia
measurements,
atrás
making
en
sure that
temas
we
de
have all of the
capacitación al personal
technical
técnico,
background,
a la
including
población,
training for the
construir
technical experts, and also
las
helping
preguntas para
the
medir, para
population
lograr lo más
understand, also trying to put
precisa
together
posible,
the
haciendo
questions for the measurement in
varios métodos, como
as
por ejemplo
a specific
entrevistas,
format as possible, using
consultando
different
con
methods like
expertos,
interviews,
también se hizo voz
also
vocales,
consulting
censos
experts. We also work with
experimentales, se probó
focus
las
groups.
preguntas
We had
en varios
experimental
lugares del
censuses.
país,
We tested the
etcétera.
questions
Entonces ha habido
in
todo un
several parts of the
trabajo de
country.
al menos
So
unos
there has
4
been
años para lograr
a whole lot of work going on for at least
incorporar
4
esta
years
medición de manera
to
oficial en el
make
país.
sure that we
Y
could
creo que
officially
los
include
retos
this measurement.
principales han
And
sido
I think the main
técnicos,
challenges have been
sociales
technical in
también.
nature as well as
El
social.
introducir esta temática en
And,
un
you know,
cuestionario
introducing
censal fue
this topic
cuestionado en
in
opinión
a
pública. El proceso
census
también es difícil
was also
comunicacionalmente,
objected
comienza difícil
to in
casualmente.
public opinion. So from a
También, bueno, los retos
communication
técnicos de
point of
que
view,
no todas
it
las
was also
categorías de
challenging. And
acceso
of course,
entienden
not
en todas
all
las
categories
poblaciones, entonces ver
are
la manera
intelligible to all populations.
más
So we had
adecuada para
to
consultar a la
find
población
the
sobre estas
best way
temáticas
to ask
fue un
the
reto
population
bastante
about
grande de
these
todo el
matters. It
equipo
was a significant challenge for the whole
y
team.
bueno, al fin de todo este proceso
And
que fue
at the
arduo,
end of
pues
this whole
también tenemos
process,
como
which was
resultados que para nuestra
arduous, we had
perspectiva son
results
bastante
which, from
alentadores,
our
buenos
perspective, are
y nos
quite
dan luz sobre esta
encouraging,
población.
positive, and cast
Entonces,
light
por
on
ese
this
lado, contentos
population. So we're
de lo
pleased
logrado con esta
with what we've
implementación.
achieved with this implementation.
Eso les puedo comentar. No sé
And that's what I can tell
si
you.
pueden haber preguntas, yo con mucho gusto.
And if you've got any questions, I'd be happy to field them.
Lorena, mil gracias. Y qué interesante
Thank you
reconocer
so much,
que
Lorena. And it's
esto
so
es
interesting to
socialmente
recognize that
retador, ¿no?
this
Que
is
eventualmente dentro de las acciones que
socially
hagamos en la comunidad tendrán que
profitable,
estar
so to
también los
speak, and that
asuntos comunicacionales.
in addressing social issues, one has
Sofía
to look at communication
Montedónico,
issues
gracias
as
por
well.
levantar
Sofia
tu
Montedónico, I
mano
thank you
desde
for
Chile.
raising
Por favor,
your hand
adelante,
from
tienes
Chile.
la palabra.
You have the floor.
Muchas gracias, Luis. Primero que todo, un
Thank you
saludo
very
a
much,
todas y
Luis.
todos
First of all, I'd like
presentes acá.
to greet all of
Me
those who
alegra
are
mucho. Yo vengo de parte
here
del
this
Subdepartamento de
afternoon.
Estadísticas de Género que
I'm
tiene el
from
INE
the
y nos alegra mucho
Gender
poder
Department
como ser
and the
parte de este
Statistics
equipo porque
Office, and I'm very
justamente
pleased to be part of this
en
team
parte de los proyectos
because
que hemos llevado a cabo nos hemos dado cuenta que es
in
en la
the
reunión
projects we've carried out,
con
we've
equipos que han tenido
realized that it's
experiencia en esta materia
when
donde
we
hemos
meet
podido sacar
with
los
teams
principales
that have had
aprendizajes
experience
para
in
nutrir los
this area
proyectos que
that
estamos
we've been
llevando
able
a
to
cabo
draw out
en
the
torno
lessons
a
in
la
order to
identificación
feed
de la
into
población de
our
las
projects
diversidades.
for identifying
Viene reuniones con
the
Ecuador, también
population
con
of
Colombia,
diverse
con otros
groups. We've
países que
also
nos han
met with
nutrido
Ecuador, Colombia, and
bastante
other countries
con su
who have
experiencia en
helped us a
realizar
lot with their
encuestas no
experience
probabilísticas y
to
encuestas
carry out
también
non-probabilistic
probabilísticas en
studies
torno a
as
la
well as
población.
probabilistic studies regarding
Entonces,
these
nosotros en
populations.
términos bien
So,
breves tenemos dos
to be
grandes
very
proyectos
brief, we
que
have
se
two
acercan
major
a la temática de
projects
identificar a la población de
dealing
las
with
diversidades de género y
identifying
sexuales. Una es
the
esta
gender
encuesta,
diverse
este proyecto de
populations.
encuesta que
One
tiene una
is
parte del cuestionario web
this
y para
survey that
mediano
has a
plazo
web-based
una
questionnaire in
encuesta a
part, and
hogares
for
y
the
ciudades
medium term,
probabilísticas. Y
we have
además
a
el INE
probabilistic
en
household
noviembre del
study, and
2022
then
publicó
INE, the
un
Statistics
estándar
Institute, in
con una
November of
batería de preguntas
2022, published
para
a standard with a
indagar a
battery
la
of
población
questions in
en
order
identidad
to
de género o
inquire
la
of
orientación
the
sexual.
population about
Y eso fue
gender
fruto
identity and
de un
sexual orientation,
largo,
and that was the result
harto rato de trabajo,
of
alrededor de 4 años,
a
que se fueron
lengthy
haciendo
4-year
arriba y
effort
similar a lo que presentaba la colega de
similar to
Ecuador,
what
de
our
la inclusión
colleague
en
from
revistas,
Ecuador
de
has
experimentar,
presented. There were
experto, etc. Y
interviews,
en ese entonces,
experimental
luego de su publicación,
surveys, pilot
había todo un
projects,
proceso de
and since then,
seguimiento
there's been a
a
whole
cómo está
project to follow up
funcionando
on
la incorporación
how
de esta estándar en
incorporating
distintos
this
operativos que
standard
tratan sobre
is
otras
impacting
temáticas.
various
Y
operations
eso
that
en la
address
práctica,
other
hemos
issues.
visto uno de
And
los
it's
principales
in
desafíos
practice, we've
que
seen
implica la
that one of
medición
the
de estos
main
atributos.
challenges
¿Por qué?
is
Porque entre el
how to
papel
measure
y la
these
práctica
attributes.
existe
Well,
un largo
why?
trecho y
Well,
muchas
from
veces, aunque se
theory to
tengan las
practice
mejores
or from
preguntas
paper
con
to
las mejores
practice, there's quite a
categorías,
long way
si
to
no se
go.
aplican de la
And
manera
even if you have the
correcta,
best questions, if they're not
entregando
applied
garantizando
correctly,
un poco la confiabilidad, la
guaranteeing
privacidad de los datos,
reliability and
difícilmente
data
se pueden
privacy,
indagar en estos
then
aspectos.
it's very difficult to inquire into these
Entonces, en ese
aspects.
periodo de seguimiento
So
ha
during
sido
that follow-up
bastante, o sea,
period,
eso lo planteamos como un desafío trabajar, que es
and we
poder,
put pose
como en
this
cada
as a
fase de la
challenge for
producción
our work.
estadística, poder
In
generar
each
estas
phase of
herramientas y
statistical
levantar la
production, we need to be
evidencia
able
en
to
forma
have these
sistemática
tools and
para
generate
ir
evidence
mejorando todos
systematically so
estos
as to be able to
herramientas que
improve
tenemos
upon
para
all of the
utilizar
tools we
la
have
medición
for
de estos atributos en
to
los
use
cuestionarios.
in
Entonces, por
measuring these
eso
attributes in the
nos alegra
questionnaire.
ser parte de este grupo,
That's why I'm happy to be part of this group,
porque si generamos como esta conexión de
because
conocimiento que
if
sea
we can bring about
sistemático,
this
podemos ir
connection of
avanzando en
knowledge
este
in a
aspecto
systematic
donde
way, then
poca
we'll be able to
referencia
go forward
tenemos
in
de la
this
materia
area
en
where we have
términos de la
so little
instrumentación estadístico.
reference in terms
Así
of
que me muestra
statistical
decir que
information.
estamos acá muy
So
felices
I
y
just
queremos
want to say
compartir
we're very
esta
happy. We want
conversación de
to
manera fluida, con el
share,
compromiso de
have this
de todos los
fluid
equipos presentes para
communication,
poder
and with it,
construir
together
un
with the commitment of
trabajo
all the teams that are
y
here,
seguir
so as to be
avanzando
able
en
to carry out
conjunto
this work
respecto a
plan and
esta medición.
to be able to go
Muchas gracias.
forward together in respect of these
Mil
measurements.
gracias a
Thank
ti,
you very
Sofía.
much. Thank you,
Es
Sophia.
bien interesante pensar
And it's very
que
interesting to think
podemos hacer
about
muchas pruebas, pero solamente
how
en campo
we
sabemos cómo nos
can
van.
carry out
Y
any
esto
number of
también puede
tests,
ser
but
un
it's
tema
not
que nos
until we go to the
anotamos
field that
de
we see how things will really
ver
go.
cómo podemos
And so
hacer,
here we're seeing
iterar
what
las
can
evaluaciones
we
de nuestras
do to
operaciones en campo.
iterate
Así
our
que Gracias,
field
Sofía, por tu
operations. So
intervención.
thank you, Sophia, for your
Le quiero
remarks.
dar ahora la
I would now
palabra
like to
a
give the
Octavio
floor
Herrera, que
to
es Heredia, perdón, que es el director
Heredia.
general adjunto
He's
de
the
encuestas
Deputy
sociodemográficas del INEGI de
Director
México.
General of
Octavio, gracias por
Sociodemographic
participar.
Surveys of the Statistics Institute in Mexico. Thank you very much. Greetings to all of you. Delighted, like those who've already spoken, delighted to be participating in this forum and to be able to participate in this relevant area that our statistics office has been working with for some years now. In recent months, we've been able to speak with many of you. We've been able to present you with the project that we carried out in 2021. This was a national survey on gender diversity or sexual diversity and gender, and this was carried out as a result of strong pressure that was brought to bear by society on the Statistics Institute, saying that we need to have statistics to give visibility to the LGBTQ plus community. And there were no instruments so to help one understand clearly about how to carry out such measurements. So one of the first discussions, which was prior to the 2020 round, was to include questions inquiring into sexual orientation and gender diversity. In prior surveys, we had thought that it wasn't appropriate without getting into a discussion about that right now. So at the time, we turned to a group of communities to work with the Institute to develop a specialized survey on this topic. And the first thing that our first concern was to give the informants the opportunity to feel that the environment was appropriate for being able to make a statement about one's own situation. And then once one had a statement, to be able to learn about employment, education, discrimination, and violence that the person would have faced. This was a very interesting exercise. It took about 4 years. There were some very tough tests in between. These are tests that never end. We end up wanting to carry out even more surveys, but then time goes on. And when we did the 2021 survey, we were able to engage on this topic with any number of offices. In coming months and years, the INEGI, our institute in Mexico, wants to once again have a project of the sort. So what we want to do is strengthen the question of tests or evidence or how we can carry out measurements and have feedback. And we have a parallel agenda to provide services on measuring sexual orientation and gender identity. And I'm delighted to be here. I am accompanied by Norma Navarro, who has been involved in these efforts throughout. We want to continue working and continue to have joint efforts through the countries, together with the other countries, and that all of our statistical production can be taken advantage of by others, and we would also like to be able to use the statistical production of the other countries. And once again, happy to be here and reiterating
Mil gracias, Octavio, por tus palabras. Yo
greetings.
coincido
Thank
en
you
que
so much,
justamente ese es
Octavio,
el
for your words. I
propósito, que
agree that that
aprendamos
is
entre
indeed the
todos,
aim, that we
tengamos estos
all learn
espacios
from
de
one another,
confianza,
and that we be
de
able
decir,
to
nos hubiera
have
gustado hacer más
a
pruebas, pero
space
tenemos
in
que
which we
salir
can trust, where we
y
could
qué
say,
aprendimos de
trust
esto
one
y
another.
qué
We would have
vemos
liked
hacia
to
el
have done
futuro
more tests, but we had to
entre
go out
todos.
and actually
Así que
carry out
gracias,
the
Octavio, por tus
survey and then
palabras.
figure
Y
out how we could all learn
Balbina, gracias desde el INEGI de Perú por levantar la
from
mano.
one another.
Tienes el uso
Thank
de la
you,
palabra.
Balbina Merino, for raising your hand, and you are now
Muy
recognized.
buenas tardes. Les saluda la ingeniera Balbina Merino,
Good afternoon. I am
directora
Malvina
ejecutiva de
Merino.
demografía
I
en
am the
INEI.
head of
Y bueno,
demography
comentarles
or
que
demographics
con
at the
respecto
INEI,
a
our
estos dos grupos o estas
Statistical Institute.
comunidades, podría mencionar con
Now, in
respecto a las
terms of these
estadísticas sobre
communities of
orientación
practice,
sexual,
Regarding statistics on
nosotros
sexual
tenemos en la
orientation,
encuesta nacional de programas
we have
presupuestales
the
desde el
National
año 2017 ya
Survey Program
incorporado
budget,
dos preguntas,
and
¿no?
we've
En el
incorporated two
cual
questions since 2017.
no le está, bueno, hemos sacado algunos indicadores, pero
Well, we
como
have
ustedes
had
saben,
some
el
indicators, but as you know,
estudio realmente de las encuestas tiene otra finalidad, pero así
the
como
study of
comentó
such
mi
surveys have
antecesor, como
has other aims.
modalidad de ver cómo va la respuesta, ¿no?, de los informantes respecto a ello.
But we also
Pero
wanted to see how
nosotros
informants
en
would
el año
respond.
2017 hicimos la primera
In
encuesta virtual
2017, we had the first
LGBTI más.
virtual
Y en
survey with the
realidad
LGBT
fue algo no
plus
probabilístico
or
porque fue virtual, en el
population.
cual
It
se
was
le dio pues el
non-probabilistic. It
acceso
was
libre por las
virtual.
personas para que
Free
puedan
access was given to
ingresar, ¿no?
people to be
Y
able to
podríamos
come
decir que
in.
tuvimos una caracterización, ¿no?
And we
Y
came
eso
up
también
with
se
a
debió pues
characterization.
igualmente a la necesidad, ¿no?, de contar
And this
con
was due
ciertos
to the
tipos de
need
estadísticas,
to
aunque no
have
sea
certain
probabilístico.
kinds of
Después
statistics.
comentarles que para este año estamos haciendo, bueno, nosotros le
This
llamamos encuesta nacional
year, we are carrying out
de
a
relaciones
national
sociales, en el
survey
cual
on social
lo
relations.
que analiza o su objetivo principal es ver la violencia
The main objective
tanto en
is to
niños,
look at
niñas
violence as
y
impacting
justamente
children
en este grupo pues, ¿no?, de la población vulnerable que es el LGBTI. Y ahí
and
justamente también
vulnerable
hemos
population, which includes
incorporado
LGBTI.
estas preguntas de
And
orientación
we have
sexual
included
porque
questions on sexual
mayormente
orientation because,
según las estadísticas pues
according to the
la
statistics,
población LGBTI son los que de repente
the
tienen mayor
LGBT population
nivel pues de violencia, ¿no?
suffers higher
Entonces,
levels of violence.
justamente nosotros también comentarles que
So we would
había
also
una
like to
sentencia
tell you that
de un caso azul, Rojas Marín,
due
también
to a
tenemos la
judgment in a
necesidad, ¿no?,
case
es un reto
in the name of Rojas
realmente
Marin,
de contar con
well,
este tipo de estadísticas, ¿no?
we need to have these kinds of
Bueno,
statistics.
en sí, esa sentencia pues está orientada a lo que es contar con
That judgment
información estadística en relación a la violencia, pero también
pointed out
pues
the need to have statistical information regarding
población
violence
LGBTI, ¿no? Entonces,
regarding the
se
LGBTI
hizo
population.
reuniones, se
So
conformó un grupo
meetings
de trabajo
were
también
held, a
para
working group was
poder
also
ver
formed
que no solamente en INEI, sino también en otros
to be able to
sectores,
see that not only
aparte de registros administrativos,
INEI, but also
podamos
agencies
contar,
and their
¿no?
administrative
Porque
records
imagínense cuando
could
hacen una
have this
denuncia,
information. Because imagine
cuando realizan
when
la
a
denuncia,
complaint
te
is
dicen es hombre o
lodged
mujer, es decir, ¿no?
and they say, man
Pero
or woman,
falta esa pregunta de orientación sexual y
but
realmente
the question on
si
sexual
tuviéramos
orientation is
en los
missing.
registros administrativos esa
And
pregunta,
if we
podríamos
had that
generar
question in
muchas
the administrative
estadísticas muy
records, then we could
interesantes.
generate a
¿Y qué
lot of
mejor que los registros
interesting
administrativos?
statistics?
Porque
And it
los
would
registros
improve
administrativos
administrative
van hasta un
records
mayor nivel de desagregación,
because
que es
then
lo que
they would
nosotros
be
realmente
all the
queremos,
more
¿no? Entonces, en
disaggregated.
verdad,
That's what we
también
think
se
we
está
need to have.
sensibilizando a los
So
sectores que
the idea
justamente
has
estoy acá
been
acompañada
to
por
raise the
Elizabeth Cruz, quien
awareness.
es la coordinadora de
Well,
los
I'm
registros
accompanied
administrativos,
by
a quien ella
a person
también
by Ms. De la Cruz
tiene, bueno, hay un
in
equipo
charge
que
of
se
administrative
dedica a lo que es el
records. Well, we have a
fortalecimiento
team that is
justamente, ¿no? Como también ellos
dedicated
tienen una
to
parte de la ponencia,
strengthening
concientizar también a las
and
personas
also
y
raising a
desde
person's
dónde tenemos que
awareness.
empezar de las autoridades en
And
realidad,
where
¿no?
do we
Para
need to
poder
start? Well, we, the
lograr
authorities, need to start
obtener un
it
mayor,
in
se
order
puede
to
decir, variables para poder yo
have
poder hacer
more
los cálculos
variables
respectivos.
so as to be
Si
able
no
to make
tenemos las
the
variables
respective
respectivas, no
calculations. If
podemos
we don't have the
realmente
respective
emplear.
variables, then we can't
Entonces,
report anything on them.
ante esa
About that, there's
necesidad,
no
pues
doubt.
eso es lo
And
que
so
quería compartir. Y bueno, tenemos
there's
para
this need. I
compartir pues
just
muchas
wanted to
cosas más,
share
quizás que
that
no
with you. I could share
podemos
many more
seguir en
things
este
with you.
espacio, poder, me
And
parece
hopefully,
que vamos
in this
a
forum,
aprovechar, ¿no?
we'll be
Todo
able to
este
take the
se puede
opportunity
decir, trabajo que se está realizando en
to
nuestras
talk
oficinas.
more
Muchas
about
gracias.
and learn more about all of the work
Muchas
being
gracias a
done.
usted,
Thank you very much.
ingeniera Merino,
Thank you,
y creo que ha tocado unos
Engineer
puntos a todos
Merino,
nos
and you've
interesan.
touched on
Por
some points
ejemplo,
that are of interest to
el
us
uso
all.
de instrumentos no
For
probabilísticos,
example, the use of
experimentales, me parece que es
non-probabilistic
sumamente
or
importante y
experimental
por supuesto también
instruments. I think that's
cómo
very important.
incorporamos
And
el uso
also
de registros
how we can
administrativos
incorporate
dentro de
the
la
use of
caracterización
administrative
de estas
records when it
poblaciones.
comes to characterizing these
Antes de pasar al
populations.
cierre con unas palabras de un invitado muy especial para
Before
nosotros,
moving
les
on to
quiero
a wrap up
recordar
with a
que
very special guest,
estamos
would like to remind you that today we have an event involving two communities of practice. Today we have a comprehensive space with all of us, but as Nadine said, we'll have these two communities of practice, the one on sexual orientation and gender identity, and the one on race and ethnicity. Feel free to take part in one of them or in both. Of course, we would love to have you on board in both of them. But if you feel that you can relate more to one of them due to your time constraints or whatever it is, feel free to choose one of them. This said, I would now like to give the floor by way of a wrap-up to José Antonio Mejía, who is the lead specialist on state modernization at the IDB, and whom you will probably already know very well. José Antonio, thanks for being with us. You have the floor. Thank you very much. I'm wondering who that special guest might be for the wrap-up, but in the meantime, I will do the talking. Good afternoon to all of you joining us for this meeting, which is truly inspiring. We can see a lot of people here, and the commitment of the statistics community of the LAC region is very significant and long-standing. So in these closing remarks, I would like to highlight 2 points. First, the importance of coordinated and collaborative work. And the other one is something that has already been mentioned during this meeting, is the importance of producing information on diversity groups to make them statistically visible. Starting with coordinated and collaborative work, as Javier said and as Olga said, the Statistical Conference of the Americas has since 2001 become this forum for the community of national statistics offices of the LAC region to be a true community, not just in name, but in the way it works. And the knowledge transfer network has certainly been instrumental in that it allows cooperation, collaboration. It has the technological tools for this kind of coordinated work. And INEGI and DANE and others have been working already quite a bit, but in this latest round, the Chilean office has played a vital role. So we would like to thank them for all of the work they've done to turn the knowledge transfer network into what it is now. And of course, the network has multiple tools, and the communities of practice are one of the key and more novel tools because of the way this collaborative work tradition and this generous South-South cooperation arrangement has in it a channel to formalize and institutionalize. Of course, it's not as simple as just getting together here and chatting for a few minutes. The challenge here is to keep these communities of practice alive and active, and they should remain relevant as a mechanism for sharing experiences and lessons learned, for us to continue to learn and make progress together. And the work of national statistics offices is very important, not just as institutions, but as individuals as well. And I'm stating the obvious. The success of these two communities will depend on the commitment and work that all of you will be doing. And obviously with the support of ECLAC and the IDB and others, but the work at the end of the day falls on the shoulders of the national statistics offices and on your own shoulders. And this will help us move forward and have concrete experiences and products. It's not necessary for everyone to do everything. You know, it's good to have perhaps pilots or concrete experiences in certain countries and share the information and make learning more useful using a collaborative approach. And I would like to go back to the point of visibility, which Caridad noted at the beginning. Statistics and official statistics help afford visibility to whatever is being measured. And I've always said this helps us back up with figures what for many of us is obvious. And an example I like to use, although not directly related, is time use surveys. There is also a community, by the way, of practice dealing with that. This helps realize the obvious, and the work of the communities and the measurements that will be taken will help us see more concretely through actual numbers and figures what we already know and is obvious to us on a day-to-day basis. And very often we talk about the importance of official statistics with a view to public policy. The key point being for the statistics, the official statistics, to also respond to the needs of public policy design. And on the other hand, sometimes official statistics have the opposite role, which has to do with helping make forgotten populations visible, thereby helping ensure that no one is left behind. So this is why the figures and the visibility of these populations should occupy a prominent role in public policy and in managing policies and programs. I'll stop here by thanking you for being here today. And of course, I would like to thank you in advance for all of the work and contributions to be made within the framework of these communities of practice. This is just the beginning of a whole lot of work. And of course, by learning about the work you do at your institutions and knowing about the work you do, I'm confident this will have a major impact in the years to come. Thank you. Thank you. And of course, there's an enormous challenge at hand, and we must all keep in touch. Just a few messages. Thank you to all of the team leading the committees, Nadine, Ercio, Maite. I'm also involved, of course. I would like to thank you all for your engagement and for your participation, and thanks also for to the technical team that has been helping with the interpretation. And we would like to also share our email with you, so do not hesitate to get in touch with you using the details in the messages you have received along with the invitation. And of course, we are more than happy to address any needs you may have. So again, thanks very much. We'll be in touch, and also hope to see you in the data forum. Have a good evening.
Gracias, buenas tardes.
Hasta luego.
Buenas tardes.
Gracias, buenas tardes.
Gracias, buenas tardes.
Muchas gracias.